I'm Robert King. I'm an attorney that handles lawsuits throughout the United States. And today we have a really special guest, attorney Previn Warren, Harvard Law School graduate and co-lead counsel of the social media addiction lawsuit. We're going to talk to you about what the lawsuit alleges, how it affects our kids, and what the current litigation looks like. Finally, if you stick around, we'll tell you what we expect to see in this lawsuit against the social media companies in the future. Today, our guest, Previn Warren, Motley Rice, lead counsel, and a really up-and-coming young, in my eyes, like a celebrity attorney, somebody that's taking on big business. Incredible to have you here, Previn. Just tell us what you're working on.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think anyone's called me a celebrity attorney before, but I'm going to take it. Yeah. It's going to be on my bio now. I'm working on a really, really cool case, kind of a first of its kind case in the country, and it is a multi-district litigation against social media companies. So Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Facebook. And it's a case brought by actually a couple different groups of plaintiffs. One group is kids that got hurt by becoming addicted to these platforms and finding themselves sucked down rabbit holes that led to all kinds of problematic behavior and mental health issues. There's 35 state attorneys general that are part of the litigation right now. And then there's a whole bunch of school districts as well.
How did you first get involved in this case? Like, what was case one, day one for you?
You know, I was actually on the defense side until 2 years ago. I was a partner at Jenner & Block, which is a big corporate, defense firm. And I had really burned out of doing that work. I was really looking for a change. I was looking to make, an impact. And I got kids of my own. There was a whistleblower who in the fall of 2021 released a whole bunch of documents from Facebook that she had, captured on her cell phone. And they were really, really disturbing. Awful, alarming statistics about what the platforms were doing. So, for example, according to their own internal documents, it said that 32% of teenage girls said that when they felt bad about their bodies, Instagram made them feel worse. 17% of teen girls on Instagram said the product makes their eating issues worse. These documents that were just astonishing, right? And it kicked up a huge firestorm of controversy across the country about, what do we want our kids' relationship to these platforms to be? I really aggressively began digging into it, and the more I looked, the bigger it seemed this issue really was going to be.
And which social media platforms are being sued primarily?
Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook.
What's, in your opinion, and I know you're not a doctor, but you're doing a lot of review of experts, what's the connection between mental health? I know you give us these stats, but the actual connection, if you have an opinion, between mental health and social media use for children?
I think the sort of foundational thing is that these are designed to be addictive, right? These are not sort of plain vanilla. It's not like watching TV or something, right? These platforms are obviously highly interactive, but they're structured in a way that really exploits the neurobiology of the developing brain. And it makes you as a kid like compulsively need to interact with them. And there's all kinds of behavioral designs that they use to make that happen. But, it's done intentionally. Once a kid gets hooked and is using the platform 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day, to begin with, that starts to really interfere in what the kid's day-to-day looks like. Okay, I mean, that time's got to come from somewhere. And it's coming from recreation, it's coming from sports, it's coming from schoolwork, it's coming from sleep. And that's like really the kind of beginning of a lot of the mental health issues that emerge as the addictive usage really deepens.
And then does it cause depression, suicidal thoughts? Then it just kind of goes from there.
Exactly. It goes from there. And a lot of what we see are young kids who, because of the way the algorithm in particular works and how it pushes content that from the kid's perspective is going to be the most quote unquote engaging, a lot of that can wind up being stuff that it's almost like rubbernecking when you drive past a car accident, right? It's like not like you want to look, but
Hmm.
you feel like you have to look, right? You feel
Yeah.
compelled almost, right? So that's how the platform's technology, it's sort of designed around that. It's like, oh, you're going to look if we put, this before you versus that. And a lot of kids wind up just feeling incredibly insecure about their bodies and who they are as people, right? Because of their interactions on these platforms and what the platform decides to push on these kids. And so that's the beginning of depression, anxiety. And unfortunately, we have a lot of clients who have attempted suicide.
How is the social media being designed to be addictive?
I'd say the number one mechanism is called intermittent variable rewards, IVR. Actually, the easiest way to think about it is from this classic psych experiment from the 1950s, actually. This guy, B.F. Skinner at Harvard, had this experiment, and he used mice, okay? And he had a lever that if the mice pushed would drop a little treat. And what he found is that, if he spaced out the treat every 3 or 4 pushes, for example, the mice would, want to come back and keep pressing the lever and expect to get, to get that reward. But actually, if he spaced out the treat in an uneven and unpredictable way, it would be even more compelling to the mouse. So the mouse wouldn't know if the treat would come on push 2 or push 7 or push 10. And they just keep coming back to, with that expectation that, oh, this time might be the next reward. And it's really like a slot machine, right? It's like gambling. That's sort of how recommendation algorithms work to maximize teen usage of their product.
Let's talk about the critics of the lawsuit a little bit. And I can tell you, as a lawyer and who represents plaintiffs myself, we've known about this lawsuit for a little while. And I think it wasn't until I talked to you about the objective findings that you're seeing across your cases that we decided to become involved in the case. This is not just kids who feel bad or subjective reports. There's all kinds of diagnosis that you're seeing from the clients that you represent. Could you talk about the kind of the objective nature of the lawsuit, which people are really pushing back? They're trying to spin it a certain way, and I don't think that that's necessarily fair.
Yeah, it's not fair, but you're right that there is a lot of that criticism, and frankly, a lot of that criticism is funded by big tech. It may not appear that way, but if you trace back the funding sources, it goes back to big tech lobbying. And look, we lived through a time when there were all these moral panics about hip hop and violent video games, and every 5 years it seems like there were concerned parents raising up arms about the next media thing that was going to corrupt our youth or whatever. This is not that. And I think big tech's done a really good job just saying, well, you had a generation of people that didn't like video games. You had a generation of people that didn't like rap. This is really different. I mean, this is not just, a certain kind of media, a certain kind of content that you don't want your kids to see or something. It is a lot more invasive because it relies on your data and your usage history and your behavior, right? So it is studying you in incredibly intimate ways and using that information to kind of reconstruct itself as a product to get you to use it more. That's totally different than watching a movie that may have some bad words in it, right? And so this isn't like a moral panic where it's just like, oh man, we're freaking out because the kids aren't all right. This is like a serious thing. And when you start to talk to the families that have lived through the after effects of this, I mean, it's devastating. It's devastating. We have, clients who were straight A students, who were model kids, who were, excellent sort of classmates and daughters and friends. And, it's like a light switch flips. And, when they get sucked into this extreme product usage, their whole way of being changes, right? And they transform. And it's really dark, the places that the platforms can lead these young people. I just think you got to, anyone that's a true skeptic just has to talk to a parent or a kid that's, been suffering through inpatient residential treatment for an eating disorder for 2 months because they learned how to do that on the platform because that's the content that was getting shoved at them.
Well, it's not just children, like adults are impacted by social media. So the fact that children's brains aren't fully developed, like you probably don't even really know yet how it's impacting them until they become adults.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I think a lot of this stuff, it'll be years before we truly understand exactly what the sort of society-wide impacts and effects are.
How many young adults are being impacted by this?
I don't think we know the answer to that question. We do know that, double-digit percentages of kids say they're on one of these platforms almost constantly. Like that's the actual phrase. And there's a Pew Center study that sort of explores social media usage for young people, and that's what it says. The incidence of usage that becomes, problematic is, I think, it's still kind of an unknown. I mean, look, there are hundreds of kids that have filed into this case, but I'm of the view that there's tens of thousands that, have really been negatively impacted.
I should have mentioned Previn is co-lead counsel on this case. So the complaint that was filed, the master complaint that's filed in the MDL, is that something that you obviously had a big part in but wrote yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would never say I wrote it myself. It's 300 pages, so it was a group effort, but I was heavily involved in it for sure.
You have a very specific way that you're prosecuting the case and I don't want to speak for you, but as a products liability case. This is designed as a product. Could you just give a little overview as how you've kind of framed this and, what a parent who calls you or talks to you, what you're actually trying to do or allege against these various social media companies?
So I guess I'd step back and answer that question by just pointing out that there's no federal law that regulates these platforms. Okay, so it's not, and frankly, there aren't, until very recently, there weren't state laws either. There's just been a void of, statutory law that would really tell these platforms you can do X, but you can't do Y. So, what I did and what the lawyers I'm working with did, we looked to the common law and we looked to old legal principles and we thought, how can we repurpose these to address, the crisis that we're seeing? And product liability law wound up feeling and was a really good fit. You think of product liability law and you think of, defective car or something, right? Or defective brakes on a car, something tangible, right? Something tangible. And then someone gets physically hurt because the product was defective. Well, this isn't quite that, right? And so the first hurdle we had to overcome was, is this even a product? Right? I mean, you can't use product liability law unless there's a product there. And we were able to convince our judge that it was, and we had to, rely on a lot of policy factors and a lot of, just kind of argument from, to some extent, whole cloth and say, look, the nature of products in our society has changed. And people use all kinds of products that you can't like pick up, and throw or drive. But that doesn't mean they aren't, hugely impactful on people's lives. And, from the platform's perspective, they said, well, no, we're just a communication service. We're like the cable company. We're just connecting people. And so we had to get over that and explain, no, these are products that are designed in really specific ways. And some of the design features are bad. Some of them are fine, but some of them are bad and actually defective and causing injury to people. That's the legal theory we advanced. And, another reason we went that route is because of what's known as Section 230. So to the extent there's federal law in this arena, it's actually to protect platforms from being sued. You can't sue an internet platform for stuff people post on the platform, right? And this came up for the first time in the context of like defamation law. So given that law, we couldn't go and sue Instagram for like suicide posts, right? That wasn't going to work. And we were going to get kicked out of court on day one. Instead, we took a step back to do was think about what is the product? Is there a problem with the product itself that's kind of causing all these issues, right? And maybe to some extent, content gets involved in certain ways, but it's not really the content that's causing the harm. It's the design of the platform that's causing the harm.
Obviously, there's this lawsuit going on. Who qualifies?
You qualify for the lawsuit as a client if you've, been using the platform in excessive amounts. If you're a kid, so say from the age of, all the way down to maybe 9 or 10 through say 24, and you found yourself compulsively using one of these platforms that's unable to control your usage, and you start to develop a diagnosed mental health issue. Early on, we were getting criticized from the defendants of, oh, you just have sad kids, sad kids. It's like, no, they're not just sad. They actually have diagnosed depression, and that's different than just being sad.
To the people that say things like that, is there a particular client that you have, without using any names or invading anyone's privacy, or is there a story or a moment in time throughout your course of this litigation where there's a person that really captures what this is all about for you as a lawyer in a firm, a parent?
Yeah, I mean, I won't use names, but the first client I sat down to interview in person, became so compulsively addicted to Instagram, and the algorithm steered her towards posts of people cutting themselves, right? And that is I guess a genre almost of things online, and she began to feel incredibly poorly about her own body, started starving herself, became anorexic. And the shocking moment to me was, she was a nurse. She rolled up her sleeves and her pant legs and showed me the scars. And she was just covered in scars from cutting her own body. And that, that's a hard thing to forget. That really sticks with me. And, and then you link that to what she was, getting pushed by the platform and kind of unable to look away from. And it's disturbing. And, we're out to really help those people.
What would you say to those parents that are out there that are in that position? I mean, you know more about, you've seen behind the curtain, but they haven't. What do you say to that person?
I say, do everything you can to wait. I have a rising 7th grader, and he has a flip phone. They're very, very hard to come by, but if you look hard enough, you can find an old flip phone, and he texts with his friends, right? I have no problem with that, but there's no apps. He can't do it. The phone just won't allow him to do it. I'd say what I'd say to these parents is, it's a lot worse than you realize. It can seem really innocent, but these are basically machine learning models. They have a mind of their own, right? And they're going to take your kid on journeys that you can't even fathom, right? And you won't know about them. You certainly won't have control over them. And all the platforms really care about is making money off your kid.
These companies don't listen to change unless there's some sort of litigation going on.
They, at the end of the day, care about their shareholders and the profits. And that's what we as plaintiffs lawyers do, is we police, abuses by powerful corporations by hitting them where it hurts and where they actually care about, which is their pocketbooks.
Is there a statute of limitations of when you can join this lawsuit, or?
Yeah, well, for kids, it doesn't really begin to run until they become 18. So in a sense, there sort of isn't from a practical perspective, right? If you're like 12, you've got time, but obviously the actual statute of limitations varies by state. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to know what state you're in and what the particular claim is. But, it could be 2 years or 3 years, sometimes a little less than that.
Generally speaking, people shouldn't wait around. If you think you have a case, cases don't necessarily get better with time. Memories fade, evidence goes away. Just because your child's maybe 13 or 14 years old, you don't want to wait till they're 20 and then ask us to go put it together.
No, not at all. I mean, my point was just it's not too late, but not that. Yeah.
It's not too late, but don't wait either.
Yeah, no, that's right. And look, now is really, the next year is really the moment of reckoning. I think the next year and a half. I mean, we are deep in discovery, so we're getting the documents from the companies. We're going to start deposing the witnesses. We're really putting the case together, and I think we're now is really a kind of unique time in history when we can make some change. So it's a good time to come into the lawsuit if you have a claim.
Parting words of wisdom on the social media addiction lawsuit. Anything you want to leave us with, Previn?
Lawyers can really do big things, and plaintiffs lawyers in particular can take on big challenges and this is not in any way like a, solo project for me or for my firm. I mean, there's dozens of law firms involved in this, and it's a team effort, right? But by kind of pooling our resources and banding together, we are able to take on the hugest companies in the world and make change and help people. I hope we get a good result out of it and really help people.